I always believed that Sarah and I were inseparable. We had been best friends since high school, the kind of friendship where you finish each other's sentences and share the kind of secrets you'd never dare tell anyone else. She was there when I got married, when my marriage fell apart, and even when I made the decision to adopt a child as a single parent. Her support was one of the few constants in my life. Or so I thought. My daughter, Emily, came into my life 2 years ago. She was 5 at the time, with big brown eyes that seemed too old for her tiny face, eyes that had already seen too much. I knew adopting as a single mom wouldn't be easy, but Emily made every sleepless night and every hard day worth it. She was my whole world. Sarah met Emily just a week after the adoption papers were finalized. I still remember how she crouched down, smiling warmly, and said, "So you're the little girl I've been hearing all about." Emily shyly nodded and clung to my leg. Sarah brought her a stuffed bunny that night, and it quickly became Emily's favorite toy. It felt like everything was falling into place. My best friend was going to be a part of my daughter's life too. But things started to shift slowly, almost unnoticeably. Sarah began declining my invitations more often. She always had an excuse: work deadlines, family commitments, just feeling tired. When we did meet, she rarely asked about Emily, and when she did, it felt forced. I chalked it up to her being busy. Then came the night that changed everything. I'd invited Sarah over for dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and salad. Emily was coloring at the table while we chatted in the kitchen. First, the conversation was normal, but somewhere between the salad and the main course, Sarah's tone shifted. She glanced toward Emily, who was humming quietly to herself, and then looked back at me with a tight smile. "You know," she said casually, "I'm just worried about you. You've taken on so much with all this." I frowned. "All this?" "Emily," she said flatly. "I mean, she's sweet, but don't you think she's kind of a burden?" I froze. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. "Excuse me." "I just mean," Sarah continued quickly, as if trying to soften the blow, "you had such a full life before. You could travel, go out whenever you wanted. Now you're tied down. It's like you've limited yourself." Emily looked up from her coloring book, sensing the tension. I forced a smile at her and told her to go get her bunny from her room. When she was gone, I turned back to Sarah. "She's not a burden, Sarah. She's my daughter." Sarah shrugged, as if I was overreacting. "I'm just being honest. I think you deserve more freedom than this responsibility." I didn't remember much of the rest of that dinner. My mind was buzzing with anger, disbelief, and something else, a deep, gnawing hurt I didn't want to admit to. The person I trusted most had just reduced my daughter to a weight I shouldn't have taken on. And I knew in that moment something in our friendship had cracked. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept replaying Sarah's words in my head. "Don't you think she's kind of a burden?" The worst part was, she didn't even say it in a heated argument or in a moment of frustration. She'd said it so calmly, like she was giving me friendly advice. The next morning, Emily came into my bedroom, holding her stuffed bunny and asking if Sarah was still here. I told her no, and she seemed relieved in a way I didn't want to acknowledge. I told myself maybe Sarah had just worded it poorly, that she didn't mean it the way it came out. But over the next few weeks, I noticed the shift becoming more obvious. Whenever I mentioned Emily, Sarah's responses were short. If I said Emily had learned a new song at school, Sarah would say, "That's nice," and then immediately change the subject. If I invited her over for movie night, she'd ask, "Will Emily be there?" in a tone that made my stomach tighten. One afternoon, I decided to confront her gently. We met for coffee, and I waited until our cups were almost empty before I spoke. "Sarah, about what you said the other night." "About Emily being a burden," she sighed dramatically, like I was dragging up an old, tired topic. "Oh, come on, you know what I meant. I just think you've tied yourself down too much too soon. You're young, you could still do so much without having to raise someone else's kid." That last part hit me like a slap. Someone else's kid. She's not someone else's kid, Sarah. She's mine, I said firmly. My voice was shaking, but I didn't care. Sarah leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. I just think you rushed into it. You barely had time to enjoy your freedom after your divorce. Now you're back to being stuck at home every night. I stared at her, trying to recognize the friend I'd once shared every secret with. But all I saw was someone who couldn't understand or didn't want to. We didn't hug when we said goodbye that day. The next week, Emily's school had a little recital. She'd been practicing her song for weeks, and when she got up on stage, holding that tiny microphone, my heart swelled with pride. I spotted Sarah in the audience. I'd invited her despite everything, hoping maybe seeing Emily shine would change her mind. But as soon as the recital ended, Sarah came up to me and said, "That was cute, but honestly, I don't know how you do it." I'd go crazy. That was the moment I realized something. This wasn't about her misunderstanding my choice. She truly believed my daughter was a mistake. And I wasn't sure I could ever forgive that. After the recital, something in me shifted. I stopped inviting Sarah to small events. I stopped sharing the little milestones in Emily's life. But Sarah didn't seem to notice, or maybe she didn't care. The texts I did get from her were shallow. "Want to grab a drink? Or you should come on this weekend trip with me." Every time I reminded her that I couldn't just leave Emily alone for a weekend, she'd respond with something like, "You really need to loosen that leash you've put on yourself." I started to realize that Sarah didn't just dislike my new life, she resented it. The breaking point came on Emily's 7th birthday. We'd planned a small party in the backyard, just a few of her friends from school, some decorations, a cake, and a bubble machine. Emily had been counting down the days. I'd invited Sarah, mostly out of habit, and she'd texted back, "I'll try to make it." She showed up an hour late, wearing a dress more suited for a cocktail party than a kid's birthday. She barely said hello before handing Emily a gift bag, which turned out to have a scented candle in it. For a 7-year-old. I bit my tongue and tried to stay polite. But as the kids were running around, laughing and chasing bubbles, I overheard Sarah talking to another guest near the snack table. "I just don't get it," she said, her voice low but not low enough. "Why would anyone choose this? I mean, she could be traveling, dating, doing literally anything else. Instead, she's stuck raising someone else's baggage." Baggage. I felt the heat rush to my face. I walked straight over, my hands trembling. "Sarah, can I talk to you for a second?" She followed me toward the side gate, still holding her drink like this was some casual chat. "What's up?" she asked. "What's up is that I just heard you call my daughter baggage," I said, my voice shaking with rage. She rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. It's just an expression." "No, it's not," I snapped. "It's an insult. To me and to her." Sarah scoffed. "You're overreacting. I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking but too polite to say." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "If that's really how you see Emily, then you don't belong in her life or mine." Her eyes widened like she couldn't believe I'd actually said it. "You're seriously ending our friendship over this?" "No," I said, my voice breaking. "You did that the moment you decided my daughter wasn't worth respecting." I walked back inside without waiting for her response. She left a few minutes later. Emily didn't even ask where she went. The day after the party, I woke up to a flood of unread messages on my phone. First, I thought they were just birthday wishes for Emily that had come in late. But when I opened them, my stomach sank. Mutual friends were texting me things like, "Hey, what happened between you and Sarah? She's saying you kicked her out of the party for no reason. She told us you've changed since adopting Emily. Like you're pushing people away." I couldn't believe it. Sarah wasn't just brushing off what happened, she was rewriting it. In her version, I'd overreacted to an innocent comment. She made it sound like I was hypersensitive, almost paranoid about anyone saying anything about my daughter. First, I tried to defend myself. I sent a few long replies explaining what Sarah had said, hoping people would understand. Some did, but others responded with things like, "I'm sure she didn't mean it that way," or "maybe you misunderstood." The worst was when one mutual friend actually said, "Well, raising an adopted kid is a big responsibility. Maybe Sarah's just worried for you." It hit me like a punch. Maybe they weren't just buying her story. Maybe some of them actually agreed with her. For the next couple of weeks, I kept my circle small. I focused on Emily, making pancakes in silly shapes, helping her practice her reading, watching her favorite cartoons together. She didn't know the details of what had happened, but I could tell she noticed Sarah wasn't around anymore. One night, while tucking her in, she asked, "Did Sarah stop liking me?" I felt my throat tighten. "No, sweetie. Sometimes people just grow apart. But it's not your fault." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Then, one evening, I got a message from Sarah herself. It was short. "We need to talk. I think you've misunderstood everything." For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But curiosity, and maybe some leftover hope that I'd been wrong about her, got the better of me. We met at a quiet cafe a few days later. She came in wearing that same confident smile she'd always had, like nothing could touch her. "Look," she began as soon as she sat down, "I'm sorry if what I said hurt you. But you have to admit your life has changed. And not necessarily for the better." I just stared at her. "That's your apology? Telling me I made my life worse by adopting Emily?" Sarah sighed. "I'm just being realistic. I think you've taken on more than you can handle. And I hate seeing you waste your best years." That was the moment I realized there was no fixing this. Sarah wasn't sorry, she was doubling down. And she still saw my daughter as an obstacle, not a blessing. I left the cafe without finishing my coffee. It was the last time we ever spoke face to face. After that meeting at the cafe, I made a decision, a simple one but final. I wasn't going to let anyone in my life who couldn't respect Emily. Not even someone I'd once called my best friend. I blocked Sarah's number that same evening. Not in anger, but in self-protection. I didn't want to leave any cracks for her words to slip through again. The friendship I thought would last a lifetime had already been hollow for months. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. The fallout came quickly. A few mutual friends stopped inviting me to things. Some unfollowed me on social media altogether. One even sent me a message that read, "I think you're being unfair to Sarah. She's just worried you took on too much." That phrase, "too much," haunted me for a while. It made me wonder how many people secretly thought the same thing. But then I'd look at Emily, sprawled on the living room floor drawing a picture of the two of us holding hands, and I'd feel the truth in my bones. Nothing about her was too much. She was exactly what my life had been missing. A couple of weeks later, I ran into Megan, a friend from college who drifted from our circle years ago. She'd heard bits of the story through the grapevine, but instead of taking a side immediately, she asked me what really happened. When I told her, she didn't hesitate. "I'm sorry, but that's disgusting. Who says something like that about a child? And an adopted one at that? She's lucky you didn't throw her out sooner." It was the first time in weeks I felt truly validated. Megan invited Emily and me over for dinner that weekend, and watching Emily giggle with Megan's kids made me realize something important. Losing one toxic person had made room for better people. From that point on, I stopped trying to defend myself to anyone who didn't want to understand. If they believed Sarah's version, that was their choice. I wasn't going to waste my energy convincing them otherwise. But just when I thought the drama had faded, something unexpected happened. One night, as I was scrolling through my phone after putting Emily to bed, I saw a message request. It was from someone I didn't know. "Hi, you don't know me, but I think we need to talk about Sarah." First, I thought the message was spam. But something about the tone, urgent, not overly friendly, made me open it. "My name is Claire. I used to work with Sarah. I know this might sound strange, but I overheard her talking about you months ago, before all this drama started. I think you should know what she said." My stomach tightened as I read on. Claire explained that Sarah had been telling people for a while that I was making a huge mistake by adopting. She'd apparently been making comments at work about how she couldn't believe I'd choose to raise a kid that wasn't even mine. "But that wasn't all," Claire went on to say. "She told someone she was worried you wouldn't have time for her anymore. She actually joked that she'd be losing you to a kid." Came off. Jealous. Jealous. That word made everything click into place. Sarah hadn't just disapproved of my decision, she'd resented the shift in my attention. The life we used to have, spontaneous nights out, long weekend trips, was gone. And instead of adapting, she'd decided Emily was the enemy. I thanked Claire for telling me, though a part of me wished I could unknow it. It was easier to think Sarah's cruelty came from ignorance rather than possessiveness disguised as concern. That night, I sat by Emily's bed, watching her sleep. Her small chest rose and fell, her hair messy from the day's adventures, her bunny tucked under one arm. I thought about everything we'd been through in just 2 years, the adjustments, the moments of pure joy, the challenges that had made us stronger. And I realized something I hadn't been able to see clearly before. Sarah had done me a favor. By showing me who she truly was, she'd given me permission to close a chapter I'd been afraid to end. She'd made it impossible for me to keep people in my life who didn't love Emily as fiercely as I did. Months later, I saw Sarah across the street one afternoon. She was with a group of friends, laughing like nothing had happened. Our eyes met for the briefest moment, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just the quiet certainty that I'd made the right choice. Emily and I kept walking, hand in hand. She told me about the story she was writing for school, one about a princess who fought a dragon all by herself. I smiled, because I knew she didn't realize the princess in her story was her. And as for me, I'd finally learned that protecting my daughter wasn't just about keeping her safe from strangers. It was about making sure she grew up surrounded only by people who saw her for what she truly was. Not a burden. Never a burden. But the best thing that ever happened to me.